here we go. All right, so this will be installing the actual motherboard into the case. All cases are a little bit different. So I've already taken this one apart. There are all kinds, like sometimes there's screws along the back that you have to undo to slide this panel off. In this particular case, this is the Corsair 760T. You can't buy it anymore. So good luck if you really like it. You have to find it on eBay. It clips on pretty nicely. It's got a little latch and just opens up like a door like that. The hinges just come right off the top. It's got another door just like it on the other side if you have to get to the back for some reason. But most cases only really matter as long as you buy the right size. There are a couple of different sizes of motherboard. If they're like really small, they're like micro ATX or whatever. This is a full-sized ATX case. I have a full-sized ATX board. Okay. A full-sized ATX case, you can put any motherboard you want on it. You can put micro ATX, all that sort of thing. But in order to get a full-size ATX board in, you have to have a full-size ATX case. And the way that really often works is you'll have these little spacers here inside the case, right? So the motherboard has little contact points or screw holes where you can put screws onto the motherboard and mount it onto these contact points.
Okay, let me see those when you...
If they're in the wrong spot, you can almost always take them off with a wrench to loosen them and then they come right off. But these are installed in the right place. Okay. Now, there is usually one that has sort of like a top on it to help you line up your motherboard. Mm-hmm. And these will usually come with your case. You'll get a box of screws for your case. So like this one has a little big on the top here so that you can line up your motherboard on that and not have to worry about screws. There's always fans in the case. You can buy some cases that don't have fans. They'll have LED lines like here for the 4-pin fan connectors. You remember I was talking about the chassis fans? Yeah. That's these. There'll be other things that always come with the fans, like the cases. You'll have like a big old black thing like this. This is usually USB. Like, you know, you have USB on the front of the case. That's this. One of these will be labeled HD audio. So sometimes you start a computer and you have like the front panel has like a headset and all that sort of stuff. That's for this, to put the audio up to the front of the case. Oh, okay, okay. So like some people just don't plug this in because everybody uses USB headphones now. So some people just don't even bother with this. You'll have this, which is more USB. This particular case has a lot of USB on it on the outside. And then you have these little LEDs. Now these are the worst part, period, of putting together a computer, especially for a guy if you got big hands like me, right? I don't have everything, but you have like a power switch. It's power SW right here. You've got the hard drive LED, so like the little hard drive, it flashes when it's reading the hard drive, like it flashes on the front. And then you got the reset switch. Now there's buttons on the front of your case. One of them turns on your computer, and one of them, like if you hold it down, it'll reboot your computer. That's your reset switch. So in order for those to work, those buttons on your case,
so you
have to put them onto your motherboard. Now I do not know for the life of me, and some cases are starting to do this, why they don't just make them like the USB header. You just make them a little bigger, 100%. Click them on there. Now, some people like their power LED button, like they turn it on and they like the little LED be like, I am on, the little red light on the front of the case. I have broken off the power LED negative, so I don't get my power LEDs. It's an old broken case, my bad. But a lot of times you'll have power LED positive and power LED negative. And then you put those on little headers on the motherboard. We'll talk about that.
We need a probe test for bigger.
Those little wires are my least favorite of this process. And we got the two cases. The case I have has two fans in the front. Sometimes it'll have a fan in the back. Sometimes it has fans in the front, the bottom, the sides. People put fans everywhere. It's just all about the cooling. The first thing you always want to do, because people always forget it, is this is what's called the I/O shield, the input-output shield. So it's to keep dust out of your case and to look pretty, really. Like, you don't need it, we could throw this away. But every computer is gonna have a spot right here on the back.
And that's where all the ports and everything.
All the ports on the motherboard come right at the back. Now, if you buy a computer, it'll always have this on there. And the I/O shield is different for every motherboard.
Right.
We were talking about how my motherboard has Wi-Fi. This has a spot for that. Right. And the other thing that you have to do for the case is here's where you put your power supply. Now, a lot of people talk about the fan on the power supply. It has to be down, it has to be up. So this sucks air in.
That side.
And then hot air comes out this.
Okay.
Okay? So hot air comes out here, sucks air in here. It's better for your case and your thermals if you mount it with the fan down. Right, so the fan goes down towards the bottom of the case like this.
So this is the bottom side.
Yeah, this is the bottom of the case, this is the top of the case, back of the case. Now, the only time you would mount the fan up like this is if you were gonna put your case on carpet. Because if you're sucking hot air into the bottom of the case in this fan, you're sucking room temperature air to cool your fan in from the rug.
So you're pushing all that hot air.
Then you're pushing all that rug filaments.
Yeah.
Like, because there's so much dust in a rug.
Exactly.
Just sucking all that dust rug up in there. And your hard drive, your power supply will fill. I knew a guy who killed 2 or 3 power supplies a year until we figured that out.
Oh my
Just a little tidbit, man. Most people don't know that.
Okay.
But yeah, unless you're putting it on a rug, and it just slides usually right there in the case. There is a spot to screw it in the back. I'll show you that in a minute. I'm just putting it here so you guys can see where it goes. We put in the I/O shield, put in this. Now we're gonna put in the motherboard. Now we put this together and we have like all our ports.
Okay.
And it goes right there into the I/O shield, right? There's a piece right there we're lining up for with a hole in the motherboard. Lines up just nice and neat, and you're done. So, there are a couple of different things to look at on the motherboard here. You've got these screw holes here with the little silver outlines.
Yeah.
And you got these little screw holes here that don't have the silver outlines. So when you screw your motherboard down, you screw the ones with silver outlines. These ones with the silver outlines, I don't know what they're for. I just don't know. But the ones for the silver outlines here, 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 you know, they're to make sure that the case is properly grounded. Okay. So you literally just take a screw, a screwdriver, and you screw all those in. Alright, so we've screwed in the ports on the motherboard.
All the screws.
All the screws. The second most common reason why something like this won't power up after you build is if you've tightened the screws down and they don't, they exert pressure on the motherboard and then the motherboard is bent. So you want to make sure you tighten them down nice and evenly. Otherwise, if you bend the motherboard while you're doing it, and it's not necessarily even the pressure of the screws, but if you miss enough of these when you plug stuff in, or just the weight of like the cooler can bend the motherboard and it won't start.
Okay. All right.
Okay. So we've put the motherboard in, we've put this in. Now we're going to go ahead and put in the graphics card. Usually along the back you have a lot of these little doors, right? And you just unscrew some of these doors. They're sort of like dust shields almost. And they lift right out of the case. I have a relatively nicer case, so these are all thumb screws. In a lot of cases, you'll just see little regular screws. Most cases now, if you're gonna spend the money, they'll be thumb screws, but sometimes they're just not. So you got the lines up with this. Often in my case, I've unscrewed the wrong ones. So I'm gonna go ahead and unscrew this one.
And what are you trying to line up? What's on the bottom of it?
So like these ports right?
Lower it down.
Okay, so these ports match sort of this, right? You see how this is here? You have two, this is called a 2-slot card. It's a little more than 2 slots because it takes up the cooler, so really technically it's a 2.7 slot if you look up the documentation. But you're lining up this bit here with this bit here, and then these ports should line up with the dust covers that you've removed, right? Now you shouldn't have to push too hard, but you should hear a click. Right, just a
And that's how. And this is the back of the.
This is the back of the case.
So you get
that's how
access to it.
And that's how you plug your ports into your processor. Now the other thing is you want to screw this back on because it is heavy, especially if you have like a nice graphics card you're gaming. You got like the 1080 Ti. You got any of the nicer graphics cards are going to be really long, kind of heavy. So you want to screw them back on. I took off an extra dust cover, so I'm gonna go ahead and put that back on right now because, you know, OCD for the internet.
Just want to keep things in place, that's which is good. Always good to keep things organized.
Yeah. Okay, so now once we've sort of done this, I'm going to go ahead and now that everything's sort of bracketed down, I'm going to screw on the power supply. Now, that's usually 4 screws.
So you're not gonna have this on the carpet, obviously. So
yeah, this is gonna be on my desk.
Okay.
So I like to put it on my desk. I keep it up where I can look at it. It's easier to reach the power buttons. But now that all of this stuff is sort of secured, we can take a nice look at the back. And I don't know if you want to check the camera to see if you can see. So we have all of our ports sort of lined up here. We have the processor here. Bring it closer to you. Okay.
Keep going.
Okay.
There we go.
All right, so you have all your ports lined up here. You have your power supply. You have your graphics card. Right. Now I have to screw in the power supply, so I'm going to take these and just screw. Just go ahead and screw them in.
All the way at the bottom.
Getting the first one in is usually the hardest because you got to get them all lined up with all the holes. Getting things lined up just so is usually the hardest bit here. But, I mean, you don't even have to use all the screws. A lot of times I can't find where the 4th one is, but usually you just mount this like so. Now this is where your power supply is going to go. This is where your graphics card is going to go. If your motherboard has onboard Wi-Fi, it'll usually come with little antennas like this. Just go ahead and screw those on now. And, you know, point them in fun angles. Very important to have your nice fun angles. All right, now I'm gonna put the case back down and we're gonna talk about the wiring. Now, I'm gonna do the irritating wiring first. And in order to do that, usually I wouldn't do at this point, but I will take the graphics card back out so you guys can see. Down here at the bottom. Come on, buddy. There we go. Is where all the wiring goes. Now you can usually.
So in this area. Oh, I see.
So down here, all of these are lined up.
Yeah, got you.
Right. And they'll have little white letterings on the bottom. Like this one says HD_audio. Now, if you have any questions about this, you can always look at the motherboard's manual, which is just pages and pages of the absolutely most exciting reading you will ever do. Ever. It is the most exciting reading I think I've ever done. Hardware manuals for sure.
You must read it.
So this one just says HD audio, that one just says HD audio. Take a look at the header to make sure the pins line up, because a lot of times one of these pins will be missing, and if you slide it on there, it's easy to bend a pin, and you definitely don't want to do that. The next one, we're just going to take this and we're going to go down here. It says comp 1. We're going to look at the pins, make sure they line up. Comp 1 goes there. Oh, come on, man. You're embarrassing me on YouTube. Oh, see, I'm an idiot. It goes over here.
What does it say?
Oh. It's front panel USB.
Front panel, okay.
Yeah, so this is case specific that I have this.
Yeah.
Some cases will have it, some cases won't. This one here says, this is a fan, so I'll deal with that in a minute. This one here says USB, so it says USB on it. There's other USB headers down here, so I'll put that in here. And this comes to my favorite part, the power switch and the reset switch. Now, I don't know if you guys can see this super duper clearly, but right here, it's gonna have the tiniest print you have ever seen in your life. Okay, I'm gonna get my flashlight from my old eyes and point it out to you. It's gonna have the tiniest print. Where's my flashlight? That you've ever seen.
Maybe I can zoom in a little. Sorry. See if I can zoom in a little. That's as far as it can go. Let's see if your flashlight will help.
So this is the tiniest print you will ever see in your life. And I don't see my flashlight, which I got out specifically for this very moment. So good job, me.
But what does it say?
It basically says the same thing that these cables do. You say power switch, reset switch, hard drive lid. So you look at it and you go, okay, well, and then you plug them in. This one is, see, I can't even read them. There you go. So it says power button, PWR-BTTN. So I put the power switch on that one. This is another thing.
Click or just slide?
No, it just slides right on.
Okay.
And then I'm going to put on the reset switch because I don't care about my hard drive or my regular LEDs. I just care about my buttons. Now you guys are free to read these and push all these pins in and get them all to work if you want. I just don't. The other thing I'm going to do while I'm at it is the case has fans. So I'm going to go ahead and plug the fans into the fan ports on the motherboard. So I have one here. And I have another one here. It says CHA fan here, right? And that's just if I want the fans on the computer to speed up and slow down when the computer gets hot. Otherwise, they'll just always stay the same speed. Having a hard time.
Okay.
Yeah, there is for the motherboard, or for the power supply, usually there is a, come on, line up. Usually there is a power line just for fans, so that, there it goes. Just for fans, so that like if you just want to plug in like an obscene number of fans, just so many fans, like this will have an extra line that you can just plug fans in. Now that I've done that, I want to show you guys how to install a regular hard drive. In a lot of cases, I don't have anything installed on this computer right now, but I will show you how it was on this case before I took them out. In a lot of cases, you'll have some kind of big black square, like up here somewhere. And that big black square will usually have what are called hard drive sleds, something like this.
Now, when you say regular hard drive, you mean this big bag?
This big old guy.
Not the SSD,
not the SSD, not the M2, like this guy.
Okay.
So like usually for this, like you'd put, like, you'd line up these pins, sometimes they're screws, and you just line it up. I think I got this one all upside down. You just line up these pins, and line up these pins, and then you would slide it into this, right? And if you got all your pins lined up, which I don't, it would just slide right in. You got all your pins lined up, and then it sort of just slides in. Then, when you look at this, this will be mounted onto the case. You'll see two different cables. This will be a power cable and this will be a data cable. You'll see that's the same cable for like the SSD. Now, different cases have different ways of mounting different devices. So I'm gonna flip this over for a minute so you can see. There's gonna be a lot of cables back here. Don't worry about that.
Oh no!
No, so many cables. These are all we're worried about right now. Usually what'll happen is there will have something small like this, and your SSDs will slide right in like that, right?
Okay.
And then you go ahead and, I never get these on quite right. But then
so you can just look up like SSD, what is it called, casings?
Slides, they're hard drive slides, and every case has a different way to install hard drives. That's how these are installed. The other thing that you should note for this, now I'm going to put it on here, I'm going to show you, is they have these ports. You're going to have similar cables. These are going to come in the same case with your hard drive usually. So that plugs in, you know, the little L plugs in here, like this. Oh, gotta go over this lid. Plugs in here, and then I was talking about modular power supplies before.
Right.
You'll see sort of these are power, right? So I'm gonna go ahead and clip that in right here. The old style, this comes with the power supply.
Okay.
The old style hard drives, like the big hard drives, will mount the same way. And then we just go ahead and put those cables, I don't know, through any of these holes so that we can wire our nice little hard drive later. That's completely unnecessary in this computer because I have the PCIe, but I want more storage, so now I have more storage.
PCIe, you mean the M2?
The M2 drive, yeah. So the cables came out here and here. On the motherboard, there's going to be all kinds of places to plug this in. There'll be little ports here, big ports here. It doesn't really matter. You can plug it in. Sometimes if you read your documentation, some of the ports are faster, some of them are slower. I'm not going to get into all of that. And then we just plug. This is the other end of the hard drive power line I was talking about. We just pick one. Now these are
right into the power supply.
Just clips right in the power supply like that.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'm going to go ahead and put the graphics card back in so that we can go ahead and do the powering.
Right onto the motherboard.
Now the thing to remember about your graphics card is it's going to generate more heat than almost anything else in the system besides the GPU. Almost always the CPU. Almost always, if you're playing games, graphics cards fans going to be spinning and spinning. So you don't want any wires sort of like touching those fans because you're going to hear and it's going to be really obnoxious.
The worst sound ever.
And you're going to be just about ready to kill somebody, not your opponent, when you do that. So just make sure you don't have any wires touching your... Now, we're going to do a video about how to make this a lot prettier later on in this series. We're going to do some RGB lighting. We're going to do some of that fancy, but we don't have any of that today. Right now, I'm just going to wire the required pieces. In my box with my power supply, I would have gotten this big old, I don't even need that, that's an extra wire. This big old cable. This has got 24 pins on it, right? It says PSU, PSU, says MB, right?
Okay.
Just clicks right here, on the motherboard, click. And then over here on this, it says MB on the back of the power supply.
So straight from the motherboard
So
to the
straight
power
from the motherboard to the power supply.
Okay.
So that's cable one. Because we got a modular power supply, I'm gonna be in everybody's shot. I don't know if you necessarily can see this the best.
As long as they know where it's going, I think it should be fine.
So this is just a power line for the motherboard. Now there's an extra one for the CPU. So I'm gonna look around for one that has about that many pins. I got so many cables. This one happens to say, because I got lucky, it happens to say CPU on it. Sometimes, like if you're running like a complicated setup, you can have different power configurations. So like if you're like a server, you're running like a professional hardware, you can have multiple processors.
Right.
So the power supply there's a little CPU line here. So I'm just gonna click it into CPU on the power supply. And then CPU on the motherboard up here.
It says CPU right there?
It says CPU on the power supply and the cable.
So how would we know what we need to plug it into on the motherboard?
Generally speaking, anytime you see these black squares, that's power. There will always be a 24 pin like this. There will usually be an 8 pin for the CPU, but sometimes it's 4 if you have like a small, like efficient CPU.
So anywhere where you can see that 4 pin and you can plug it in.
Yeah, and
on the motherboard.
If you read your hardware for your motherboard, it'll definitely tell you for sure. If you don't have power, you're going to see the same thing that I was telling you before. The computer will come on, the fans will spin, and the computer will just shut right off again. That's called posting. Usually, if you haven't modified your computer, when you turn it on, it'll go through a series of tests. Do I have enough power? Is all my RAM plugged in? All that kind of stuff.
Right.
And then it'll beep when it's done with those tests. Now, lately, not all computers are beeping. So some of the computers don't beep as much anymore, but that's called the post. So if you get to that, whenever you launch your computer and it has that screen and it says press delete to enter setup menu, that means you're already past post and your computer is able to turn on.
Okay, gotcha. Okay.
Now, I've done the CPU power, the master power for the motherboard. I need a cable for the graphics card.
All right.
And the graphics card, like I said, is thirsty. Usually, like if you got like a TI, you'll see 8 pins here. Like you see that plastic bit's blacked out there. I've only got 14 pins here. So I'm not going to use these 2. But I'm still going to plug them into the power supply. These say EVGA on them because the power supply is EVGA. And we could go through and look at all the different cables that come with the power supply. If you have different peripherals or whatever you're doing, there's just so many different things you could plug in. I can't even cover it all. Like some people are running multiple graphics cards.
Oh yeah, definitely.
So make sure you just plug everything in. It goes straight from here.
Bam. And bam.
Yep. So like I said, there's those little danglers because I don't have a spot for them on my computer. And then these just go straight down to here, where it just goes click and click into the back of the modular power supply.